What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So, Mike LaFleur officially fired, or parting ways, or mutually split. Throw whatever adjective you want in there. It was a pretty wild fiasco yesterday. When the news broke, there was multiple reports saying that the New York Jets, Mike LaFleur, he's been fired, separated, whatever you want to use again. And then there was a bunch of reports flying in that were refuting that, saying that's not true. He's still on the staff, things are still being evaluated, etc. So there was a question that I seen floating around. It's the one that initially came to my mind. Was Robert Saleh and or potentially Joe Douglas overruled by Woody Johnson, which is something we discussed before? Or was this in fact just people didn't have 100% confirmation, and we know how Jets Twitter can get. I very much so hope that Robert Saleh made the very difficult decision to fire Mike LaFleur. And I don't mean that as in I wanted Mike LaFleur to leave. I mean that as in I wanted it to be Robert Saleh's choice. And Joe Douglas supported him, Woody Johnson, staff, etc. I don't want it to come out, if we ever find out, and the situation was that Robert Saleh was willing to move into a third year with Mike LaFleur. Granted, he spoke about bringing in a veteran or senior assistant for him, and that somehow maybe Joe Douglas overruled it, or that Woody Johnson did step in and intervene and say, based on what we've seen, this is never going to happen, and said he needs to go. Some of the other news we know as well is that and it was interesting because based on Mike LaFleur's press conferences, he almost spoke in a tone and in the verbiage of someone that kind of knew, like, I'm most likely on my way out. And so I don't know. The sequence of events are just really kind of weird to me, right? Regardless of that, my immediate thoughts outside of if Robert Saleh was the one who dropped the axe was Mike LaFleur I would have liked to have seen in the role again for a third year. And it's more so just for a matter of consistency. And I think that's going to be the word we hear a lot of the offseason. Consistency in the offense, consistency in the coaching, consistency in the quarterback room, the offensive line. You could use this in numerous places when it comes to why we failed as a team this year. But I think it just would have made the most sense in regards to the statements we've been hearing about still believing in Zach Wilson, doing our best to develop him, etc. It would have been the best situation to keep him within the same scheme, same concepts. Obviously, a couple new players that we're going to throw in as part of the overhaul. But this would have been the most effective thing for the offense as a whole. Now we're talking about not only is Zach Wilson going to have to reset his fundamentals and everything, Breece Hall's coming back. He's going to have to learn a new playbook. Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore. We've seen the trouble that Denzel Mims had before. So for those that are high on him, I would have concerns again. Veterans like Tyler Conklin, CJ, they should be fine. And then we're talking about overhauling the offensive line. So couple pros, couple cons there. Ultimately, you would have to imagine we're going to get better coaching no matter what, unless we end up going the unimaginable route of picking up somebody like an upstart in the college ranks that's hot, that hasn't necessarily had offensive coordinator experience at the NFL level. I don't see that being the case, but with that said, I think we cast a wide net. So those will really be my only particular reasons for us keeping Mike LaFleur. I like some of the things that he did in terms of some of his passing concepts. I know he got a lot of flack for the plays that he was called, but I remember some of the evolution of this offense and, the players that stood out and different things of that nature. Michael Carter was talked about in most circles as a fringe running back one. We know now, at least after this season, ideally that's not the case. He's definitely in a running back by committee role and probably a solid number two. I wouldn't say even an elite guy. But when you take a look at what's happened with Mike LaFleur, there's some key things that stick out to me. 5 times we failed to score 10 points, and this has been under the guidance of Flacco at the helm, Zach Wilson, and Mike White for periods of this season. So you can't say it was strictly Zach Wilson. We couldn't get anything done. He had Joe Flacco, the veteran, that couldn't get things going. He had Zach Wilson, obviously, and, the struggles there are well documented. And then he even had Mike White, and for as hot as Mike White was as a quarterback for us for, a stretch of games, still the offense was better under him, but the consistency wasn't there. We didn't have the flashy plays, which that's not really what I'm about, but we didn't have as much chain movement as you would really still expect from an above average quarterback. We didn't obviously have the passing touchdowns and things like that. Some other things, 9 games we failed to even score a touchdown of any kind in the first half. No rushing touchdowns, no special teams touchdowns, no passing touchdowns. Beyond me, and this is why we were playing a lot of catch up. This also feeds into a lot of potentially why it looks like Michael Carter has taken a step back, why Zonovan Bam Knight maybe couldn't have blown up a little bit more, why a guy like James Robinson, a lot of that self-inflicted, but still maybe not have been able to find himself some opportunities. And then we failed to score at least 20 passing touchdowns. Once again, it's a passing league. We actually end up having more rush attempts than pass attempts this year, which was great, but still is a very ineffective, unbalanced offense for the most part. And for anybody that would have generally been watching a game, you would probably be in shock hearing that, because it felt like we were just seeing pass after pass after pass after pass for a while. I mean, the first 3 weeks of Joe Flacco were ridiculous. I think he was second or third in pass attempts over that span, which nobody would have ever wanted to see from any quarterback, let alone a guy that's 38 or 37, whatever it is, and can still aging, and not really a great fit for this offense, considering what our offensive line was performing like, and that he doesn't have fresh young legs to try to be elusive and make some things happen. One of the other stats that blow my mind in terms of the run game, Breece Hall went out in week 7 with an ACL tear. He still ends up finishing our season as the top rusher with 463 yards, to let you know how bad it was trying to get production out of Michael Carter, Bam Knight, and Ty Johnson. And they all had their flashes and periods, but we couldn't really sustain anything. Not 100% on them. Part of that's the offensive line. But ideally, ultimately, if he truly got fired, it makes the most sense to me, and he's put the onus on himself for this numerous times. It falls on the coaching as the offensive coordinator. He's responsible for the entire offensive operation as a whole. So you have to take a look at each position and, objectively, the quarterback room regressed. The running back room, we found a star in Breece Hall, but for the rest of the players, Michael Carter in the second year, Ty Johnson continuing, finding Bam Knight and all that kind of stuff. Still, ultimately, I would say we regressed in that area. Offensive line, a lot of injuries. I would give him a pass on that, honestly, but still, Connor McGovern was our most durable, most consistent player, and it still was almost unnoticeable. We had more attention on Dwayne Brown and him playing with one arm, or George Fant getting beaten to death, Nate Herbig having his splashes of run game dominance than anything else. So offensive line wise, again, we regressed, but I would give him a pass on that. The tight end room, obviously significant upgrades, but we still seeing issues, lots of drops. CJ Uzoma couldn't really get factored into the game plans for at least half of the season. And then once we got Mike White, we started to see some more flashes from him. But essentially not utilizing the veteran presence that we brought in there as best as possible, though we did have to use CJ Uzoma in more of a blocking role than expected. But still, I can't say regression is obviously an upgrade, but it didn't feel like we maximized what we invested there. And so I can see why he honestly got walked out. And, to sum it up, I wouldn't expect any immediate news in terms of coaching candidates, or at least in terms of solidifying who our next offensive coordinator is going to be. This is going to come up in another video, but I got a list of names just for you guys to keep on your temple. In the meantime, and this is going to be a net that gets cast wide. I mean, if we're not searching high and low, moving mountains, etc., I wouldn't expect any less. So we have Gary Kubiak, Cliff Kingsbury, Frank Reach, Darrell Bevell, Brian Johnson, Kevin Patullo, Pep Hamilton, Troy Calhoun, who is actually a college guy, but he does have some ties to the NFL. Jay Gruden, Greg Olson, Doug Marrone, Todd Monken, and Nathaniel Hackett are the names that I've seen floating around there for a while. So I don't know how I'll do this, but I'll probably do like a most likely candidates video, or the guys that make the most sense. I'm not quite sure. If you guys hear of any other names, definitely throw those in the comments for me. But otherwise, let me know what your guys' thoughts are. You know where I'm at in terms of Mike LaFleur being gone. I would have wanted him to stay, but this really would have been kind of the final straw for him. And this was more so about trying not to cause any tension within the offense. But, I mean, I guess it offsets that if you get a guy with the experience that can come in there and, you know, get things going right away. But yeah, it is what it is. I don't know. I don't have too much more to invest into it there. We'll probably talk about it with the boys tomorrow on the Jets Flight Squad podcast. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Coaching candidates that you've heard about if I didn't name them. And what's your thoughts on Mike LaFleur and this whole parting ways fiasco that came up. And were you pro him staying, or were you pro him leaving? Either way, I'll catch you guys again. Peace.